What's up, guys? So today I wanted to take the opportunity while we have this brand new tiny house going on and go through all the different steps from the ground to the roof of how this whole thing comes to be what it is. Also try to throw in some tricks that we use to help us frame some of these longer walls, and also how do we measure all this stuff out. So let's get started from the beginning. When it comes to our deck, right, we got to make sure that it's nice and level, but also straight. You know, we don't want any squeaks. So the way we do this is, I like to use an I-beam style chassis or trailer. This is going to have the same kind of I-beams that you would find in a normal house, and allows us to build a deck that's the same way that you would build it in your own home. That would be on a normal foundation. The only difference is this is on wheels. That's the first thing. I like to use this type of trailer because it allows us to frame the same way you would any residential home. So the first thing we have to do is we have to figure out what type of materials we're going to use. Because our chassis spans about 70 inches from each I-beam, and then we are going out 12 feet, we can use a 2x6 floor joist because there's enough support per span. Plus we have outriggers that help hold that deck stable. So all of our floor joists are 2x6. So what we'll do then is we figure out how long we need to make our rim joists. And in this case, it's going to be 30 feet long. And so we'll line those up, and then we'll kind of lay them on the sides of the trailer, and we'll pre-cut those so that they're in the right length. The next step is figuring out how many joists we're going to need to go down the whole length of the trailer. And the easiest way to do that is just to hook the end of the trailer and just pull the whole way down. And what we're looking for is our red dots, because those are our 16-inch increments, right? So we count the first one, which is the end, and then we count every single one after that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that real quick and show you what that is. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and then if I run out of tape like I just did, I'll make a mark. So 24 joists. So then the next step involved in this is we'll buy our lumber 12 feet long, but we don't want to nail 12-foot long 2x6s because it'll push us actually out another 3 inches. So we have to take into consideration our rim joists, which when we stack those together, they're 1.5 inches each, so that's 3 inches. So we actually want to make our joists 12 feet minus 3 inches, which comes out to 141 inches. So our joists are going to be 141 inches long. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll cut that many. And then we're going to do a couple of other things to make this a little stronger. On our ends, we're going to triple up our rim joists. And what that means is we're actually going to cut one that caps the end at 12 feet. So it will actually be that 12-foot long length, and that's going to cap our end. And then on the inside of that, we're going to put 2 of those 141-inch thick joists to really give us a solid 4 inches on our ends. This is going to prevent our chassis and our floor from conflicting with each other, and it'll stop it from any kind of twisting that might occur. We don't want twisting, because twisting means drywall cracks in the corners and all sorts of things when it ends up at its location. So to prevent that, we'll always beef up our ends. Now in a normal construction home, you don't need to do that, but when we're building a tiny house that's on wheels, it's going to be moving 70 miles an hour down the road, we want to make sure we give it the best opportunity to not have any problems as it goes from point A to point B. So once we have our deck all framed up, then we go ahead and install our sheathing. Now, one of the tricky things about a tiny house is you're going to have insulation sandwiched in the floor. In this particular case, we are actually going to insulate from underneath, and then we will cover the entire bottom of the trailer with a thin foam board, which helps hold the insulation in place and also gives an extra barrier from rodents and pests and things like that. With that being said, we really want to protect as much as we can against moisture. So we'll use a Dry Max plywood, which is really good at keeping moisture out. And then we'll also use a glue and glue this whole thing down, because then that also is going to add rigidity to this entire platform and keep it from twisting, but also prevent water and things from going down there. And it's all tongue and groove, so it locks together really nice, and we have no squeaks or anything like that. So then we'll put all our plywood down. And then how do we stand a wall like this without worrying about the bottom slipping out from underneath us? Well, I'll tell you in a second. But the first thing I want to tell you is, before we set any walls, we have to figure out where our walls are going to go. And the way we do that is we'll measure off the end of the trailer 3.5 inches, and we'll make a line, and then we'll do that on all of our corners. And I don't know if you can see this, but there's a little red chalk line on the bottom here. And what that is that's our measurement. So we'll pull 3.5 from the outside to that line, and we'll do the same thing all the way on the end. We'll do it on all sides. And then we'll pull our chalk line all the way, and we'll snap it. And that's our straight line of 3.5 inches, and that's how we know our wall is going to be perfectly straight. Now, it's really easy on a 4-corner box like this to make sure everything's straight, but you got to start with one wall. You can't, it's really difficult to try to square this whole thing up without having a wall stood. So this is what we'll do, is we'll put up our long wall first, and then from there we'll square up the rest of our walls, which I'll show you in a second. But how do we keep these from sliding out? Well, we build the wall laying down on this platform. It's a nice framing table. It's a nice way to build this. And then we actually sheet the whole wall while it's on the floor. But before we start sheeting, after we frame the wall, we'll toenail. And that's what these nails right here are. These get cut off later, but they line, you'll see them every couple of feet down the trailer. And what that is we line this edge right here up with our line. And so when our wall is being framed, that 2x4 is actually rolled upwards like this. And then we'll toenail from the backside down and hold it on that line. And this will hold the whole wall in place so that when we're nailing everything together, the wall's not moving around on us, and we can kind of rack it and do what we need to do. But then when it comes to standing the wall, with these toenails in place, it cleats the wall. So then we only have to be on this end, and we just stand the wall up, and it lands right on our red line almost perfectly. But once it's stood, then we can then kind of bump it around and get it more tight into place. The other thing that we do is we extend our plywood all the way down past our wall to the bottom edge of the chassis. And this allows us to then bump the wall tight and nail that plywood, so this plywood goes all the way past our plate and gives us a nice strong intersection. So after we get the wall stood up, this is really important. The bottom might be straight, but the top, it's got no support yet because we didn't put a roof on. So how do we get this wall to be straight? What we do is, we see this string right here? This string is a really easy way to make sure that the top plate is straight. You don't need a laser, you don't need any fancy equipment. All you need to do is get 2 nails, a hammer, and a chalk line. And what you do is you're gonna put a nail right on the edge, and you bend it outward. And you go down to the other end and you do the same thing. Then you're gonna bend that nail so that the starting point of that line is flush with this right here. That's called our 0 point. And then over here, we'll do the same thing. Then after you got your line, now you know where your straight point is. You'll have one guy up on a ladder, or female, and you'll pull that wall until that top edge of your plate lines up with that string. And the way we do that is we'll take some spreaders like this, and we'll take a 2x4 like this. We'll nail a couple of nails right at the top. Then we'll lay it on the ground, and we'll figure out, okay, well, it can only move this much or this much. So then we'll figure out how much travel this can have, and we'll put another 2x4 on the ground, face nailed like this, and we'll just rest this right here on the side. And then one person pulls this, and another person eyeballs the string, and when the person who's eyeballing the string says, okay, we're straight, you'll hold this, boom, boom, put a couple nails in there, and then that'll hold this straight. We do that to both sides, and then we know we have a very perfectly straight wall, top and bottom. And then we're ready to put the roof on. So now that we got all the walls squared, it's time to now start putting the rafters in. Now, we have a gabled roof on one side here. On this side, we're actually going to be putting a rooftop deck. So the rafters, or the joists, floor joists, because it's going to be a second floor up there, are almost going to be flat. But let me show you how we put a little bit of angle in the rafters so that we don't have to put anything extra to make our roof deck. So the guys are cutting that right now, so let me show you that. So if you notice, it's so hard to see, but what we have is we've got our full height of 7.5 inches on the top here. Now over here, we've got 6.5. What that translates to is from our center point, it's about 6 feet 3 inches. And when we take that 1 inch difference from the top to the bottom, it comes out somewhere around 1/8 to 3/16 decline, which is a little more than a standard patio. Your concrete patio you'd find in your backyard, that has a slope or a pitch of 1/8 of an inch to allow the water to shed as best from it. Because this is a roof, and we want to really make sure that most of that, if not all that water gets off that roof, we want to put a little extra kick in there. So we got it about 3/16 and maybe even 1/4 inch, which is the same pitch as a standard drain pipe. Now, rooftop decks always concern me, so after we get all these floor joists in place, that top section is going to be sheeted with 3/4 marine grade plywood. Basically, you could submerge this plywood underwater and nothing's going to happen to it. So we want to make sure that even if there is a leak, we're going to make sure we keep the water up there and not inside the house. While we're getting ready to set all the roof deck, I wanted to just go through how we frame our windows real quick. We have a couple of different studs here. So you're going to put one stud that's going to go the full length from the bottom to the top. That's called your king stud. And that's going to go right next to your header. After you get these two figured out, then you're going to cut what's called your jack studs. And those are going to go right here and right here. And for a tiny house, we're concerned about weight, so we only do one jack stud, but in certain framing styles and construction, to make this really, really strong, you can add 2 of these in here. The way you figure out all of this is really simple. It can be really complicated, but here's a really simple way to do it. So since we're only going to have one jack stud on each side, the best thing to do is cut your bottom sill plate, okay? And you'll cut that to whatever your rough opening needs to be. This is a 2x2 window, so we try to leave a little bit of extra wiggle room in there. So we got 24 and like 1/8. Our actual window is more like 23 1/4, so we'll have a little bit of play on each side to make sure we can get that window nice and straight. Go ahead and cut this first. Then figure out your header. Since you have 2 jack studs, 1 on each side, these are 1.5 inches each, so total you have 3 inches. So you're going to make your header, which in our case we make them out of 2x6 lumber. We do 1 2x6 here, and we put a piece of 1/2 inch plywood in the middle and another 2x6 on the other side, and we sandwich it all together. And the reason we put the 1/2 inch plywood in the middle is because then that makes this 3.5, and it lines up with all of our stud depth. You're going to make this header 3 inches bigger than whatever your sill plate was going to be. So in our case, because our sill plate is 24, we're going to make this guy 27. Once you have those cut, you'll then nail your jack stud to your king stud, both sides, and then set your header in place. Figure out what this dimension needs to be. And in this case, because it's a 2x2 window, it's the same width as it is height. Make some marks on your jack studs of where this needs to go, and then measure what the difference is from your top and bottom plate to the bottom of here. In our case, it's 58. So we'll cut 2 supports, one here and one here at 58. The way we figure out where this goes is we have to figure out what our layout is. So right here I've got 2 studs that are 16 inches on center. See, so 16. So then when I pull across here, none of this lands on 16. So we need to add the stud wherever that next 16 on center mark is. And then we land here, and then we continue on with our dimensions. This is really important for when we put the wall board on the actual inside. We want to make sure, because that wall board is 96 inches long, and that's in increments of 16, it works out that we have something in case a wall board ends up here. We want to make sure we have a seam to catch it. So that's how you figure out where this one goes. Otherwise, this really isn't doing anything other than making sure that we have somewhere for that wall board to land. That's pretty much how you do this.